Welcome to Umbrella Rebellion. I'm Marcy.
And I'm Dee.
We are finding healing after leaving a cult.
We will be discussing abuse and personal experience with the ATI, IBLP, and fundamental churches.
Trigger warning. This podcast may contain descriptions of various forms of abuse. Please take care for your safety and well-being while you are listening.
If the content becomes too much for you to handle, please turn this off. We hope to expose harmful teachings that lead to and justify abuse,
with the hope that those that are experiencing abuse can find support and escape from it. Welcome to Umbrella Rebellion. Hi, Dee.
Hi, Mercy. Hey, everybody. So this week on the podcast, we are going to continue the story that I ended off with about me getting special attention because I was the only child in town for a while. So before I do that, a few things, not many, hopefully not 5 minutes worth. Down below are links for our Facebook, Instagram, merch. And somebody had asked about a Patreon. I am not at the level of being able to handle another platform at this moment. But if you do want to support us monetarily, there is a link on our Anchor FM site. And if it's not down there in the description, I will try to remember to put it there. You can donate to us through that. There is a support link on our podcast, audio podcast platform. So that's one way you can support us monetarily until we have the wherewithal and brain space and time to manage one more platform. So with that, I'm trying to think of kind of how we ended that conversation last week. I had said that I was the only child in town for a while, and you asked.
Oh, because when we were talking about parents and their reactions to us and me moving back and being a single mom under the roof of a parent. Right. So you were talking about.
Yeah, my adventures back and forth in my parents' house. That's right. Okay, so in my leaving in my headquarters video, I had stated that I was there in 2002 for 3 months and then I got married. So obviously before headquarters, I had moved back home. And then after headquarters, I moved back home and then I got married. And 6 months into the marriage, I kicked my ex-husband out of where we were living, which was an apartment behind my grandmother's house. Well, actually, my family kicked him out. And then he manipulated his way back into my life. And I could have cut ties at that moment and been like, nope, not doing this. But the pressure of not getting a divorce, still holding those beliefs. We met in a independent, fundamental, Bible-believing church. So divorce was not really an option.
Especially that quickly after getting married. They would have said, just work it out.
Right. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not reasonable to give up at this point, right?
Right.
So anyway, my grandmother found beers. Not like that's a big deal. Like, I don't know why he couldn't have just brought them in the house. Like we were over 21. It wasn't like it was illegal. Like stashed behind her shed. And it was like, okay, that's interesting. But then there was the whole drug use. So that became an issue. And that's when I kicked him out, or my family and I kicked him out. And because I was like, you can't do that to my grandmother. Like, you can't have that on her property. That's just not acceptable.
Yeah.
So, and then we got an apartment. And it was kind of like when things got really bad, I would go to my parents' house for a couple of days. And then I'm trying to think.
Did they treat you any differently when you went back for those couple days versus when later after you were divorced? Was there a difference between you being married and?
There was a lot of talk about reconciliation and trying to work it out and figuring out what's acceptable to live with. And so for those that might not know my family, alcoholism runs in my family. My grandfather was an alcoholic. 2 of my uncles were alcoholics. And so there was a lot of abuse of substances that was kind of normal for our family. But I didn't want my kids to grow up like that because, like, I saw, like, I don't know how my mom grew up. I mean, like, I know some of it, but I was always uncomfortable around my uncles that were drinking and my grandfather. And it just really bothered me. And I didn't want my kids to grow up with that in their house. So, like, when I would go back, there would be a lot of talk about what's the right thing to do, what's the biblical thing to do, and it's like there's really nothing in the Bible about, well, if your husband is a drug addict, what do you do? You know, pray, read your Bible, God's going to change him. So, I don't know when I read this book. I'm kind of thinking it may have been right before I got married or right after I got married. I read The Created to Be His Helpmeet from the
Mm.
Pearls.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one story in that book that sticks out to me, and it made me want to throw up. And so that's the kind of like teaching that, and we're going to do a book review of that one day. So we're going to leave that story for you to want to come back to. But it just really kept honing on, like, the pastor. I talked with the pastor. He kept, like, if you pray enough, if you read your Bible enough, God's going to change him. And my parents were the same kind of way. And I had, an uncle who was saved. He was also, a recovering alcoholic, and, God changed him. So if God can change him, he can change anybody, and all that kind of stuff. And so it was really hard because I wanted my marriage to work, and then I got pregnant also.
That throws another whole kink in things.
Yeah. So, and it's like my parents got married really young, and they're still married, and it's like, well, if they could do it, I can do it, right? And there was just constant upheaval in my marriage, and having learned a lot about narcissism and gaslighting, there was a lot of that going on. And I felt like I was living in an alternate reality
Yeah.
because
You
everything
are.
I mean, to an extent, because I was living in his reality. Like, whatever he wanted to be the truth is what I had to accept as the truth. And it's like, wait, this doesn't track. Like, this isn't no, like, am I, like, he would make me feel like crazy for suspecting things that were actually happening
Yes.
and try and convince me that these things weren't happening. I knew how much he wanted kids, and I was not a fan of birth control just because of the way that it affected me. And I had no idea about my cycle. I mean, I didn't grow up in the cult, but we were Catholics, and so we didn't really talk about reproduction and how that works. So, no, if you don't want to hear any of this stuff, you can leave. we're, we're talking about married people stuff. So it wasn't like I was really able to do, like, natural family planning or anything. And I did struggle getting pregnant for a while, and I was kind of glad, but then it really didn't matter. It's like, I love my kids. I'm glad I have my kids. I wouldn't trade them for the world. But I was like, if I would have just stayed away and waited for him to show that he changed, which he would have never done, I would be in a different boat right now.
Yeah.
So I didn't wait for him to change. I allowed him to pressure me to come back, and it was right around my birthday, and his birthday and my birthday are 10 days apart. And so it was like, I don't want to be alone for my birthday. I'm living in a hotel and blah, blah. And it's like, well, I don't want my husband to suffer. So, I signed up for this.
Yeah.
I really didn't sign up for what I got, but I signed
No.
up for it, right?
Yeah. But narcissists
So,
are good at making you think this is what's going to, presenting one thing, and then as soon as you're married to them, or as soon as they think they have control over you, then the narrative changes.
one of
So it
my
really
aunts,
isn't what you signed up for.
yeah, it wasn't. One of my aunts had called us. Like, I think I had a cell phone, but it was when we were still using landlines primarily. And we had a message on our answering machine, and it was basically like, hi, you've reached blah, 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 blah. And then it was salvation message.
Oh,
Like,
jeez.
yes, like, let me get it in any way I can to anybody and everybody. And it was his voice. And my aunts like were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, and it was like a super huge red flag for them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something else on the message, and I can't remember what it was, but they felt like it was super controlling, whatever it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
And so, but they couldn't tell me anything because I wouldn't receive it
Yeah.
because y'all are Catholics, and y'all don't understand like the Bible believing fundamentals that we are, and we're just a different thing, and you don't understand it, so you're going to resist us, right? And you're going
Right.
to like,
Right.
yeah. So I was in that mindset. So like I would go back and forth, like have a bad time, and like I kind of clung to my parents for safety,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't always there.
Yeah.
So they kept pushing me back out and pushing me back out, and instead of trying to figure out a way to help me like
Mm-hmm.
in it, when I was pregnant, I was super tired, and I didn't really, I got kind of depressed too,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't keep my house very well, and that was, a contention in our marriage. I've never been good at folding clothes, and I've never been I have ADHD, and I would go, and we had a laundry room, and I would go and I would put the laundry on to wash, and 3 hours later I would be like, "What was I doing? Didn't I have something I needed to do? Oh, I was washing clothes, and it's 105 degrees outside. And so by the time that you go and check the laundry, you have to wash it again,
Yes.
which costs more money. And
Yes.
we were super poor because I wasn't working.
Yes.
So it was just a constant battle for me to like keep laundry like from mildewing and
Yes.
getting, getting it
Hard to
clean.
focus when you've got, also if he's wearing you down that much mentally, that's hard to get, and your brain's already having trouble because of the ADHD. It
Mhm.
would be really hard to focus on even the small things like that.
Yeah, and I mean, we had a really tiny apartment, and it was just I'm a very people person, and it was almost like he didn't want me to do anything social.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of an introvert, but he was at work, and so if I would go do social things, he would get upset with me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if he would have just let me do my thing, I would have come home recharged and able to clean the whole entire house,
Yeah.
and he wanted me to cook, but I wasn't a great cook. I didn't learn how to cook from my parents, mom, I should say, because she was our primary,
Mm-hmm.
person to cook. And that's a whole nother thing. She taught me a few things, but I never really wanted to cook with her because if you don't do things the right way, her way, then it's this whole thing. And it's like, I never, like, why am I going to go do something if I can never do it right? And you can't be kind enough to show me the right way. Or if it yields the same result, what does it really matter what it looks like in between? You know?
Yes.
So, and I don't know if my mom is a narcissist. I really don't think she is, but she's a super high controlling person.
Yeah.
And so what I got with my ex-husband was what I was familiar with as well.
Yes, and what feels familiar, usually we think is okay. I ran into that same thing with my narcissistic ex husband as well,
Mhm.
because the anger felt normal, and so I didn't think anything of it.
Yeah, the anger never felt normal to me. Like his level of, because my dad was a super chill person.
Okay.
And he never really, like, I can only remember one time in my life where he blew up and he like left the house, and I went crying to my neighbor, and I'm like, my parents could get a divorce. My dad yelled at my mom because I had never heard him yell at her ever. And so, it's obviously they didn't get a divorce, but like in my little tiny brain, I was like, oh my gosh, they are going to get a divorce because he's had enough.
Yeah. Yes.
So the anger was really surprising to me. Like the level of response to what was being done was so over the top.
Yeah.
And it's like, instead of having a conversation with me, like, I would really prefer this. It was, you know, he would come when I'm cooking dinner, he would taste it and like fix it for me.
Oh.
And when we would sit down at dinner, I'd be like, well, how do you like, the dinner? Oh, well, it could use this and that. And I would do this. And this is how you do it. I mean, it was like I'm like, oh, well, okay. Guess I didn't cook it right again. It was a constant thing. And it's probably one of the reasons. And I talk to Jeremy about this all the time. It's one of the reasons I don't like to cook is because it makes me so anxious to have somebody critique my cooking. And, it's like, it's weird. It's weird. So, I mean,
Funny
I
how those little trauma things bring up, they seem small, but they're not because they're connected to the trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and, my kids, they're very opinionated. So when I was cooking for them, and I used to cook every single meal for them all the time because they had a lot of food sensitivities, so everything had to be done by scratch.
Yeah.
So they would voice their displeasure in a lot of the things. And I couldn't really cook them things that tasted good because they were allergic to a lot or sensitive to a lot of things that make things taste good. So, it was really, really hard.
The food
So
was a battle.
it was always a battle. It's like I was either stressing myself out about cooking things for the kids or cooking it the right way for him and having to cook 2 different meals at dinner because he wasn't going to eat what the kids could eat. And then, I mean, never mind what I wanted to eat.
Yeah.
Or liked, or, I'm very sensitive to gluten and dairy as a lot of my family is. And so, it was like a lot of it was, stuff was gluten and dairy. And I wound up gaining a lot of weight. So we were in the apartment and I was pregnant and we were buying a house. And so to save some money while I was in the transition of finishing being pregnant and the house needed a little bit of work before we could get into it, we moved in with my parents. And then I had my baby, and then I wound up having an emergency C-section, and they have a 2-story and the bedrooms are on the second floor. So I really couldn't come up and down and up and down and up and down the stairs every day. And so I was kind of like laid up in the bed for a couple of weeks. And he wasn't a whole lot of help to my parents for me. So they wound up taking care of me, helping me with the baby, and taking care of this grown man.
Yeah.
So, and I felt like I think they felt pretty put out about that, So, especially my mom, because a lot of it fell on her.
Yeah.
So we moved to a house, and it was quite far away from our family because that's where we could afford to live, and that's where he would agree to live. So
isolation.
So it was a good 20 to 30 minute drive. The other thing is I had a fully paid for vehicle when we got married. He didn't want me to keep it because he wanted to be able to work on the vehicles himself. And he basically used that as an excuse to control what car I drove, which wound up needing an engine, which we wound up driving to Ohio to buy a busted engine that didn't work, and then having to buy a second engine to put in the car that he had to rebuild in my grandmother's garage. And she's a very tidy and neat person. So having all of that like spread out with all of the oil and stuff, she was like freaking out about it. Like it was giving her anxiety. And so finally the engine got in the vehicle, and it was a gas guzzler. So it was like when I didn't have money for gas, I couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So, and Samuel hated it. The Jimmy, it had no AC. He would cry. You were a baby. He would cry the whole time we were driving back and forth because it was so hot. Even to this day, if the car is hot, he's like, "Oh my God, it's hot." Why did you do that at this time of night?
I don't know, because normally I can go to sleep with caffeine.
You need to go run around the block 10 times.
Yes, Sam.
Are you crazy?
Yeah.
Obviously not as crazy as you drinking 4 cups of coffee this late at night.
Okay.
Please don't ever do that again.
Okay.
Because guess who's going to have to struggle to get you awake tomorrow?
Him.
Maybe you.
Maybe. When have you ever gotten yourself up by yourself?
When I haven't slept.
When I haven't slept.
Well, then you haven't. Actually, no, you haven't gotten up.
Bye. he's at the age where he's not going to keep me up all night. Like,
yes. I was like, at least you can just ignore him if he's gonna stay up all night.
Mostly. You can't be loud. That's my only rule. If you're going to stay up all night, don't be loud.
Right. So my question would be, when all this was happening with your husband, did you start to question some of the, since this is about getting out,
Mm-hmm.
did you start to question any of the ideas yet, or when did that kind of kick in for you as far as?
I struggled with it. I struggled with being a submissive wife.
Yeah.
You know, like, how am I supposed to submit to this person who treats me so poorly?
Yeah.
You know, and I kept thinking, like, am I not, like, guilt about not praying enough? Like, if God really was the God that they tell me he is, he would,
Yes.
he would change my husband. And, it was a long road from that and going back and forth to my parents' house. I filed for divorce when my middle child was 6 months old, and got to the point where I couldn't stay in the house anymore. And because my lawyer kept telling me, stay in the house, it'll be yours. Stay in the house, it'll be yours. And I'm like, I can't live with this person anymore. I can't do it. And I called my mom up one day and I'm like, I have to leave. I cannot do this anymore. And so I moved into their house and wound up going back to him to try and reconcile. And then it just got to the point where we had an agreement that if he ever backslid back into doing drugs again, I could call him up and tell him, don't come home.
Yeah.
I did.
Uh-huh.
And he came back home.
Yeah.
And this was after Noah was born, my youngest. He was about a month or two old, and I walked into the bathroom and I found some paraphernalia. We only had one bathroom, so the boys would, if they woke up at night, they would have to go in there. He was asleep in the bathtub with his paraphernalia on the counter, and I was like, I'm done. And I posted that on Facebook. I'm done. And anybody who knew what I was going through knew what I meant.
Yes.
And he didn't have Facebook, so he had no clue. And
Mm-hmm.
so from the time that came a realization to the time that I moved out, I was working behind the scenes to get things set up. And one day he went to work. I packed up the whole entire house except for his stuff. I contemplated taking all of his tools and selling it because I knew he wasn't going to pay me child support, but I didn't have room in the truck, so he got saved from that.
Darn.
Yes. So, then I moved out, and, I was living at a friend's house, and then my grandmother's house became available. She allowed me to move there. Then my grandmother was moving back, and my mom and dad were going to move into her house with her to take care of her. And so I wound up going into the back apartment where I had started with my ex-husband many, many years ago with all three boys.
I got to sleep on the top bunk.
You got to sleep on the top bunk then?
Yeah, I think.
Okay. Now, I think you were on the pull-out drawer because I had a bunk bed and then I had a trundle underneath of it.
Oh.
It was a 600-foot square double garage.
Oh.
That was the apartment, So me and three boys in one room,
Yeah.
remember sleeping on the trundle.
You remember sleeping on the trundle?
Yeah, and then when I got older, since we were living there like basically kind of my whole life, I remember sleeping on the top bunk, and we
Possibly.
kept switching up.
Yeah. Somebody would get aggravated with toys falling on them, and so they would switch beds.
Yes. Sounds like typical children.
I think at some point I put the trundle next to my bed, and you slept next to my bed for a while.
Probably.
Yeah. So anyway, that's when a lot of the dynamics of the relationship between my parents and me getting out, that was around the time, like, I had been in that house for a couple of years. This was probably around 2015, 2014.
Mhm.
And that's when, kind of like when Recovering Grace, we had found it.
Yeah.
So, and my brother had been working on Homeschoolers Anonymous. He had been bucking my parents for years.
Mhm.
And, I was always like, why is he doing that? Like, this is the right way. And I don't understand it. And, I didn't live in my parents' house under all of that. I was an adult and coming for them, coming to them for advice in a very strained marriage and getting advice from them. But it's like I never really, like, for a long period of time, I think I was at home for maybe a year when I came back from the Air Force before I was out.
Yeah.
And so, and I was an adult. Yeah.
Hold on just a second.
Yeah. So where were we? Crap.
I've lost it.
So I was talking about how I kind of found Recovering Grace, and
Yes.
my brother was bucking the system,
Yeah.
and I didn't understand it at first. And then I started reading Recovering Grace, and I was like, oh, I understand it now. And so that's when I completely left the IBLP ATI beliefs, but I was still going to the fundamental church here and there. But my life was getting a little bit harder to maintain with being a single mom of 3, working a full-time job, navigating public schools with the autistic child. So I had an autistic child, navigating public school. With that, I was constantly going to school with meltdowns and teachers meetings and IEP meetings, and it was a lot. It was a lot. For a while, I would go to church, put the kids in church, and sit in my car and work for an hour because I could get 1 hour of uninterrupted work. And so at this time, let's see, the boys were probably in 2015, 10, 9, and 4. Thank you. 10, 9, and 4. And so, I was waiting for Noah to be able to go to public school so I could stop paying daycare, because daycare was about as much monthly as a house note would be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I was like, well, and being a veteran, I qualified for a VA loan, so I knew I would be able to do 0 down payment. So yeah, I mean, and so as I stopped being available to go to church, I was promised some things from the pastor, like, we'll come pick up your boys and we'll do this and we'll do that. And, we'll help you out. And then there was no help. And then I would ask my parents to, like, bring the kids to church for me so I could do things around the house or work or whatever. And my kids were a lot. And so it got to be too much for them, and they didn't want to do it. And nobody else in the church stepped up. They didn't say, look, we really can't be bringing, Danielle's kids here anymore, and so it was kind of like nobody came over and said, hey, I noticed you haven't been going to church. Is there anything we can do to support you? And I could have said, this is what I deal with.
Yeah.
If there's anything in it, I am struggling to get my hours in at work, and I'm on FMLA, and I'm taking time off, and I'm, constantly have this battle of, and I still do, of being able to work enough hours and having enough PTO to pay my bills.
Yeah.
And it's like, if somebody would have come in and said, hey, how can we help you? And I could say, okay, this is what I do. What can you do to help relieve anything? Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do for me, but what can you offer me in this to help me? Like, if somebody would have offered to cook 1 meal a week for me, that would have been huge. When they would go to their dad's on the weekend, I would spend the weekend working and cooking.
Yeah.
And prepping for the next 2 weeks, because it was actually it was only twice a month. So twice a month I would have grocery store, cook, work, grocery store, cook, work, and get everything ready and in the freezer for the next 2 weeks. That way I can just pull stuff out, throw it on plates, and I wouldn't have to try and, because I never knew what day the phone would ring and it would be school. You have to come up and pick up your son, or your son's been suspended for 3 days because he threw something at somebody. And I'm like, well, what did you do to piss him off?
Like, how did that happen?
Like, if you see it starting to escalate, you need to learn how to de-escalate. Like, shouldn't get to this point, but that's beside the point. So it was a constant battle for time. And so that made me realize that the church really wasn't about helping the people that were in the church. They were more concerned about going and getting more people to pay tithes.
Yeah.
And to fill seats and to put crowns in their basket for when they're in heaven. And it's
more jewels in their crown.
More jewels in their crowns. I don't know the analogies anymore. I get lost. Bouncing baskets.
Maybe that's an analogy too. I just always remember people saying, "You're earning jewels for your crown. Your heavenly
I
crown's
forgot.
gonna have, but you got to do all these pious things to earn those jewels," which is
Right.
so wrong. But
Right. And it's like, I mean, let the single mother, and I have to say, they were supportive of me when I was going through my divorce. They actually did come to court with me and support me. So that was I was surprised and shocked that they did that.
yeah, that's very surprising.
And so I was very grateful to them for that. I really appreciated their support. That gave me a little bit of, okay, well, maybe not everybody in these kinds of churches are as crazy as the rest of them. Maybe there's a church out there that actually has sense, and can see that there are reasons for divorce and you don't keep children in an unsafe environment,
Mhm.
So that kind of gave me hope at first. And then it's like when I was at my lowest,
Mhm.
I was just left there
Yeah.
to flounder and try
Yeah.
and figure it out myself. And so I was like, you know what? I don't have time for that because that doesn't benefit me at all. What benefits me is being able to pay my bills. So I have to work. Church goes by the wayside. And some of it, I just started like, my kids need food more than the church needs it. So I don't tithe.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't have enough in my budget to tithe, and they always say, oh, well, if you tithe, you get more. And I'm like, no, that's not the way it works.
No, it's not the way it works. I mean, I've seen God do some mighty things when I had need, but but I didn't tithe. It wasn't
Right.
because I was doing my duty according to the church. I wouldn't even go into church there for a while and he provided
Right.
for our needs. So it just
So
we'll get stuck to that.
that leads us into the, quasi relationship that I had. So that kind of broke me out of it completely
Okay.
because he and I actually had a lot of conversations about my past and where I was because I told him, I said, I struggle with this. Like I
Yeah.
struggle with making these decisions.
Yes.
And he's like, you need to, like, he encouraged me to figure out who I was
Yeah.
outside of that. What do you really believe? And I'm so grateful for him because of that, because I was like finding myself as a single person, but when I broke out of the church and started seeing this guy and started like, okay, well, they told me this was wrong my whole entire life,
Yeah.
but I don't know that I believe that it's wrong. So let me go experience this and see if I think it's wrong,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I did a lot of exploring
Mhm.
of
Which is the
myself.
only way to figure out who you are. And I think you're absolutely right within this cult. Figuring out who you are was a huge part. I think that I did not have enough time to figure that out for myself before I got mixed up in my narcissistic marriage
Yeah.
too. And I think that if I had figured that out, then I don't know that I would have been able to see through him, because narcissists are really good about pulling, working that to their advantage. But it might have helped a little bit. Might have thrown up more red flags. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just never know what you would have seen if you
Yeah,
had a different
you never know.
mindset.
No.
Because coming out of, a long period of being by myself, and I was discovering myself and some
Mhm.
of, but I was so busy. I didn't have a whole
Yeah,
lot of time.
no.
I started doing, this workout thing, and I became an instructor for a while, and that gave me a huge boost of confidence. And it was still a struggle to like find the time to do it and get people to, that I could afford to watch my kids, because my kids are a handful. And so not everybody can watch my kids. Like the one lady who let my kids walk around the neighborhood when they were like 8 and 9 or 10 and 11. I don't know. No, they were probably 8 and 9, and take mail out of people's mailboxes.
Oh, oh no.
And my uncle came by to check on us and noticed my kids were free ranging in the front yard. And I'm like, oh, I thought that you said that they could go in I said they could play in the backyard that was gated.
Yes.
Did you not think to look for that? You're fired.
Yeah. Logic. Logic.
It's like, I can't even let a grown person, like she was a grown adult, like watch my kids. And I told her, you have to keep your eye on them. If you can't see them and you can't hear them, they are up to no good.
Yes. Silence means danger.
You were probably 3 at that time. You were probably still at daycare because daycare would go longer than school. So I'd have somebody watch the 2 older ones until so I could work longer. So it was pay for somebody to watch somebody to work longer, and you're barely making enough money to do that, but you have to get the hours to get
you
the
work to pay
benefits
the
and
sitter.
pretty much, but
Yeah.
also to get the hours to get the benefits and get the work done, it was like constant. So that was that. And then after that quasi relationship ended, I did a lot more, I guess. I had more time to like really think about things and like solidify my beliefs,
Yeah.
but they're not many. Like I'm still trying to figure out where I stand on a lot of things because I haven't had enough time to do like research and study. Like I kind of just think in my mind, well, do I believe that anymore? Nope. I don't know what I believe, but I don't believe that.
Yes. Yeah. Nope. I've had those moments. No, nope. Yes.
And
I may not know what spectrum I fall on right now, but I know it's not that. So that's probably a really good thing to share with our viewers, that sometimes the first step to this is just to know what you don't think.
Yep.
Like and then you can figure out, and maybe it'll take some years to get there, but then you can figure out what you really do believe later.
Like the first step was, no, I don't believe divorce is never an option.
Right.
And, I had to go, you know what? My God loves me too much to keep me in this.
Yes.
My God loves my boys too much to have them treated this way. I am not showing my boys how a woman should be treated. I am putting up with abuse and showing my kids that abuse is okay if I stay here. So, it's like, and it was just like that realization, like, no way can I do this anymore. Like, I have nothing left to give anymore. And it's like, I need to show up for my kids. And if I'm continuing this battle with this grown person, I'm not there for my kids the way I need to be.
Yeah. It was my kids that did that for me too. And it was one of those things where it just came down to the point where I was like, I can't keep them safe here. I can't keep them safe here.
Yeah.
And that was what did it.
Yeah. Mine was more of a mental, emotional, spiritual, financial control that I was not okay with. Yeah. And, one day we were he had gotten into an accident right before I left, and he wasn't working. And I was like, I was pregnant with Noah, and I was like, should I go get a job? And he's like, you can't make enough to support this family.
Yeah.
Hey, like, okay. And then I was like, do I leave my kids alone with this man?
Right.
All day.
That's the next question.
I was like, okay, well, he said no, so I can't leave my kids alone with him. Darn. It was like, that was my battle. Do I go out and get a job and leave them alone with him? And it's like, then he didn't want me to. And so to be a submissive wife, I didn't go and do it. And, I'm glad I didn't, because I don't think it would have been a good situation for my kids to be alone with him. He was post-injury. He had a motorcycle accident. It wasn't bad. It was very minor, but he had some broken bones and stuff, and he was recovering. And so he was under a lot of pain medication. He wasn't taking it as prescribed. And so he was asleep a lot.
Yeah.
So it was like, I would have to get like an overnight job where they would be asleep for the most part,
Yes.
So, but anyway, I digress. So that was kind of my couple wake up moments that, what I had been taught can't be right, and so through, I don't even remember, I started talking to my aunts, my mom's sisters, a lot, and kind of they talked to me about some of the stuff that they were reading on the Homeschoolers Anonymous and the Recovery and Grace, stuff, because I didn't have time to read. And, we would have conversations about it, and they would tell me some of the stuff that my brother had wrote. And I was like, oh my God, I did not know my brother went through that, and it was like, I'm so sorry. I wasn't there to protect him from that, and it's like, I think when he was 17, he had made it his life mission to try and protect Michelle from going through, my younger sister, from going through everything that he had gone through. And so he bucked my parents at every turn. And
Yeah.
it was a very contentious time. And my dad and I would have conversations, and it would be like, why is Nick leaving all of this, teachings and stuff? And I'm like, I don't know. He doesn't have kids. He doesn't understand, because at that point I had kids
Yeah.
and I was trying to raise them right, and it was like, obviously, like, and it was weird because it's like I was a rebellious kid, then my brother was a rebellious kid, and it's like there's a pattern here, and
Yes.
both ways didn't work for my parents. Like the way
So,
they
go ahead.
the way they raised me didn't work. I became rebellious. The way they raised him didn't work. He became rebellious. So
Like, maybe
what's
it's just natural to have a little bit of rebellion.
and figure things out on your own. You can't
Right?
control your
Maybe
kids
you
after
need
a
to
certain
have
point.
that to become your own person and figure out who you are. So my question was going to be, so when your brother was doing this and you were talking to your parents about it, did they ever ask you to try to talk some sense into him? Because I got that conversation several times.
I think they knew I had my hands full. And
Okay.
so they really didn't. And my brother and I weren't really close for a long time. Like we still don't. I accidentally called him today. And we actually had a conversation, and it was like, I'm sorry I called you. I just picked up my phone and it died. I guess I needed to talk to you.
Oh my God, yes. Serendipity.
Yes. So, it's like every once in a while I'll text him and, we'll have a conversation, and it's more of like, okay, what are our parents up to now?
Okay. Yes.
What's going on with our younger sister? What's, how can we help her? A lot of it is trying to advocate for her as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
So my parents are out of ATI, IBLP cult, and now thankfully my dad has left the IFB as well. Things are getting better. My mom basically has changed cults.
Oh.
So she's in all the conspiracy theories about the election, and
Yes. It's almost like they have to have something.
it's like they have to have something that only a certain people know about.
Yes.
And not everybody else knows. Their little secret.
Yes.
And
it makes them special. It makes you feel like you have purpose.
And I talked to my mom and I'm like, Mom, this is a red flag. Mom, this is a red flag. I cannot talk to you about this because I see so many cult red flags in this.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, I'm watching it myself. I'm like, yeah, you watched the basic seminar yourself too.
I'm sorry, that's not funny, but
you're taking what somebody else has watched and they're putting their spin on it. You're watching it and then you're reading what they interpreted this to mean instead of learning the context around what this, I don't know. It's just, it's
like actual critical thinking skills. I think that that's something I learned when I first got out too, is that the critical thinking skills are, so you don't just take it hook, line, and sinker. You actually got to think through it and then research it a little bit. And that's one of after all these years of working on learning those things, that's one of my main things as a parent is trying to not just tell the girls, no, that's wrong, or yes, that's right, but teach them how to figure it out on their own. Like, like I'm not going to give you the answer. You need to let's logically think this through and kind of not have to be as susceptible as we were.
Like when my son wrecked his car, and it was kind of due to him not taking some of his ADHD meds.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have impulse control when he's not on his meds. And it's like, okay, what did you do wrong here? Yeah. Well, I wrecked the car. And I'm like, well, what led to that?
Yes. Back it up a little.
Right. What did you do differently for a week before this happened? I didn't take one of my meds. I'm like, there you go.
Yes. Gold star for you.
Do you think this would have happened if you had been on your meds? Probably not. Not that it's for sure and for certain wouldn't have happened, but the likelihood of him getting an impulse and acting on it would have been less.
Yes.
So, yeah. So I think that's kind of why our family has a lot of work to do is because they're out of it, but there's some other stuff for dealing with. And
Wow.
so my younger sister has some chronic problems, and I was talking to my brother about it today. A lot of these conditions are statistically, a lot of childhood trauma victims have these diagnoses. It's
Yeah.
there's a correlation,
Yes.
to these diagnoses and childhood trauma.
Mhm.
And she was the one that was born of it and in
Yes.
it. I mean,
Yeah.
she wouldn't have been born if it had not been for the cult.
Yeah.
And just trying, I kind of, it's really, I try to not get in it too much because I'm already at the point where I'm advocating for two other humans and myself.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so being an advocate for a grown adult, but also knowing how easy it is to and how difficult it is to be a grown person. I was a grown person with 3 children, and
Yes.
my mom still controlled some of the ways I did things.
Yes.
And I wasn't living in her house, but I was living on her property. And
Yes.
so it was like, well, you live on our property, so you can't do this.
Yeah.
You live here, so you can't do this. And you're going to, be a bad example for your sister. I'm like, what does it matter if I do it here or somewhere else? She still knows what I'm doing.
I quite often with siblings, especially at the beginning where I was the oldest and I was the newly minted adult and there were still ones at home, or as we got a little further down the road and they hit teenage years and going through a rough patch and they were bucking rules too, mom would come to me and say, can you please explain to them my thought process and make them behave? And I would have to put up really strong boundaries and say no, because for one, that's not my place, and two, I don't believe that anymore. So no,
Right.
I will not help you establish that rule with them because I don't think it's right. And not in
Right.
so many words, but it happened a lot. And then as the younger sisters got older, it happened to them too. She would come to them and say, will you please talk to your brother about this? And they'd be like, yeah, we'll talk to him, but not the way you want us to talk to him. Like, we would have opposite conversations.
Right. Like, this is okay that you're going through this. This is normal
Yes, and we're not going to
childhood
tell you
development.
to stop. We're going to tell you this is how you do this safely.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, we're not going to. This is normal life stuff that you're dealing with, but we're going to tell you how to do it safely so you don't mess anything up. Since parents won't talk to you about it.
So, I guess in a way I got a lot of attention, but my sister didn't want that attention. My older sister, she had moved out, got married, she had 6 kids.
Yeah.
She,
Mhm.
had a husband and they have a good relationship and he's supportive, and she homeschooled, and she's done a lot of the things that she's wanted to do, and she was supported in it for the most part. I mean, like I don't know the ins and outs of everything about their marriage, but I feel like they have a really healthy marriage, so she didn't need my parents. I struggled a lot in life with my undiagnosed ADHD for so long, and not understanding ADHD and how to put things in place. Like, when I was a mom of toddlers, I was learning how to manage a household and not forget the laundry. Like, go turn on a timer, so you don't forget, set your alarm on your phone and put reminders, and, like, all of my calendars have like the day before reminder, an hour before reminder, 30 minutes before reminder. And it's like, depends on how long it'll take me to get there. Then sometimes it's like 2 hours before, 1 hour before, 45 minutes before, it's like, you need to leave now. So, it's like I was learning tools how to function in the midst of having small children, and trauma and drama and chaos. And, like I said, like I had moved like 20 some odd times in 20 years, or 20 times in 20 some odd years. Like, I pretty much moved houses average of once a year for like 22 years.
Yeah.
This is the longest I've lived anywhere in this house at almost 4 years since I lived on the property at my grandparents' house. I think that was the only other place I've lived several years in the same place, but I had to move houses once. So it, like, that counted as a move because I had to like I had to go from a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house to a 1-bedroom, 1-bath house. So I had to pare down like crazy. So,
And
you know,
that's just traumatic in and of itself. Moving, I've done moves like that too, not with only a few with young children, but it takes a full year to get settled in a place, really fully get settled, and then by that time you're moving again. So it's your constant state of disarray and chaos.
yeah. So the funny thing is every time I started hanging pictures on the wall, it was around a year.
Yeah.
And that's when it would be like, why the heck did I put these on the wall? I'm just moving. Like
Yes,
I would, and I'm like, I wonder if I'm gonna move now because I'm hanging pictures.
It was your glue.
I'm finally at the point where I can hang pictures, and I feel like I'm settled in the house. Guess it's time to move. So
I have a few of those things too, and a lot of times it was pictures.
yeah, but I think a lot of that also is because as a child struggling with ADHD, I ruined a lot of relationships. So it was always, let's turn over a new leaf, let's
Yes.
start over.
Yes.
And some of it, once I moved schools,
Yeah.
because the reputation I had in that school was so terrible, and they basically, you know, wouldn't help me like at all at my school. It was basically like, you're just rebellious, lazy, and dumb. Not dumb, but like if I would study, I would pass the test. It was so boring to study. So I couldn't make myself do it. I had to like listen to classical music and write notes and do flashcards and just to get myself to want to study because I had to make it fun somehow. So
Yeah.
doing flashcards did it for me somehow. I don't know. Organization. Like the brain likes organization. It can't do it, but it loves it.
Yes, it can't do it. Can't do it on its own, but it loves it. Yes. Yes.
So, it's like, so I struggled in school and, I think I eked by like with C's and stuff, but on the subjects that I liked, I did better because I retained the information. And so I would get in trouble at school for twirling my hair and flicking a pencil and stuff because I was a fidgeter.
Yeah.
That was way before fidgets were a thing.
Yes.
So, it was, I struggled a lot through my life just being able to figure out how to function. And, it's like when I finally realized that part of that was the weight of trying to be something I wasn't. I was never a submissive person. I didn't submit to my parents. I certainly wasn't going to submit to a person I didn't respect, and in my marriage now, I'm not a super submissive person. We come to, like, we have a partnership where we make agreements together, but it's never one person has a say over the other person. If I'm not comfortable with something, he's like, okay. If he's not comfortable with something, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to force you to do something you're not comfortable with.
Right.
Like, I know how that feels. Like, and both of us know that, it's like we both have had relationships where we were forced to do things we weren't comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so it's like, now it's like, okay, we can come up with a different solution. We might have to think on it a little while, but we'll figure it out. That's our other
Mutual
podcast.
respect.
So how I left was very long and drawn out. And it was like one piece of the puzzle just led to another. And, it wasn't this all of a sudden realization. It was like these slow, like peels of an onion. Like,
Yes.
this got dismantled and then this got dismantled. And I really think when it came out in Recovering Grace that Gothard was a pervert,
Yeah.
it really rocked my world because I know some very, very dear people to me that have been through that. And I was like, oh my God, he preyed on the people that had this happen to them and made them susceptible to it again. And then he made them basically abuse their own family after they had been abused. Like, I know nobody can make you do anything, but when you present it as the answer to life and your kids being safe and happy and healthy, but it's abusive.
Yeah.
it's like you just made all of these people who were abused. And I feel like a lot of people who are drawn to cults are people who have had lots of trauma in their
Yes.
life.
Yes.
And because it promises safety.
Yes.
And all
because
you want is
of
safety.
safety. Yeah.
And turns them into abusers themselves, which when they get out, they have such a hard time dealing with. And, it's like, I don't know all the parents, but I know some parents that are struggling with that because of they haven't dealt with their initial trauma
Yeah.
enough. And they're struggling with knowing that they traumatized their children and accepting that. Like, I know as a parent, when my children were little and I was in the IFB, I did some damage. You know, I try to not be like, well, I was doing that to save my marriage because it doesn't matter. There was a boundary that I should not have crossed no matter what. I should have stood up to that grown man and said, no, I'm not doing this to my children. But I was, trying to be a submissive wife. So it was like this constant yo-yo in my head of this is not right. I can't do this. I have to do this. This is what I'm supposed to do because of the Bible says I'm supposed to do this. And it was like, I was constantly hurting myself and hurting my children, and it's hard to sit with that.
Yeah.
And then see how that's affected them at a older age, and, the only thing I can say is that there's a difference between my two oldest who grew up with their father and in that environment and with a mother who parented differently than with my youngest son, Noah. And there's a vast difference in their ability to cope and deal with daily life and to function in society. Like, I never have trouble with my youngest at school. I was constantly at school with the older two. Samuel, here and there, Jonathan a lot, but that also was because of his autism. But it's like I couldn't go a week without getting a call from school from one or the other.
Yes.
And it's like, I think I've gotten 3 phone calls from Noah's school. He's about to be 11, and
Yeah.
I think twice it was an injury.
Yes. That is night and day difference.
But, it's like, I'm here for my older kids. I'm not giving up on them. I know what they went through. I know how it affected me as an adult. I can't imagine the trauma that has changed the way that their personalities are.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not my parents didn't quite give up on me. Like, at some point, I think they did to a certain extent, but it's like my parents are always there for me, whether we agree or not, whether they're believing in things I don't believe in. We're a family and we're always going to be there for each other. It's just sometimes we're not safe to have deep conversations with
Right.
each other,
Kind of how we as a family. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's safe to have deep conversations as siblings, but not with the parents. But my parents have been there for me every step of the way of single motherhood. And they have been our lifesaver as far as that goes. So I hear you there. We do function outside of that. Family is family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So once I got out in my own house, I was able to parent my own way. That was the first time I was able to parent, and only my decisions had to be considered because and only what I wanted my kids to have, freedom with. It didn't affect anyone else because I had to make parenting decisions based off of my ex-husband and what he wanted to allow. And then when my parents lived in the house in front of me, what my mom was able to cope with. And so I had to control my children's behavior based on how my mom handled their behavior. And her ability to live in chaos. And it's like, well, just don't look out your window. I don't know. Don't look out your window. Close the blinds. If you don't see it, it doesn't bother me. I don't know why it bothers you. I don't know. So, it was like, oh my gosh, like, I feel so free, and I think that was the first time I really felt free because I had nobody trying to control me or what I could do. And I'm not saying that what my mom did was necessarily bad. It was just,
but you did have to think about it. Yeah.
I had to consider her a lot in my parenting. And it was like, I finally didn't have to do that. So yeah, it's really tough living with parents when you're an adult and a parent
Yes.
yourself,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know. And then having been through the whole thing of the cult and the IFB and feeling like I didn't know how to make decisions because they teach you that all of your thoughts need to be checked with the Bible and you
Yeah.
can't trust your own self to make
Mhm.
good decisions.
Yeah.
So it was like every decision I made almost gave me anxiety because I was like, am I making the
Yes.
wrong decision?
Yes. I struggle with the same thing. Yes. It's still even, what is it, been 12, 14, 16? I don't even know how many years now. I still struggle with making decisions like that because or trusting my gut. My gut is always right, but I
I should
still
always listen
struggle
to
to
those
trust
little,
it.
all those little things in your head that are
Mhm.
saying no, 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 or yes, yes, yes. Listen to them.
Yes.
And the
Listen
other
to
thing
them.
is, if they're wrong, it's okay. You're
Yes.
human. You get to make mistakes
You get
and
to make
learn from them.
We were just talking tonight before we got on here to start recording that I had made a very small mistake today at work. And I was saying, it's giving me so much anxiety. And I know it's not that big of a deal, but I just have this thing in my head that I have to be perfect and it's yelling at me that why didn't you know what to do or why didn't you do something different? And I was like, this is going back to this stuff.
Yep.
Like,
Bring me right back there.
yes, it did. So even years down the road, today it happened to
Yeah.
me.
So if y'all are experiencing that, number one, it is completely normal.
Yes.
Number two, you can trust yourself to make good decisions.
Yes.
And if you make a bad decision, in all likelihood, you can learn from it and do it differently later. Most of your decisions aren't going to be life or death.
Yeah. I think that in that culture, I felt like every decision was because everything was so black and white that it was make it or break it, like life or death. It wasn't any
Heaven or hell. I mean, like
Yes,
even
there
though
was
we were
no in between.
even though we were saved, it felt like, if you do this, you could lead to a reprobate mind and be given over to the devil.
Yes. So that's where my brain
Yeah.
went today was,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, I made this very tiny mistake, but they're going to hate me. And then then I'm going to lose my job. And then I won't have any money. And then that's the end of the world. Like all of our things come crashing down. And it's the end of the world for me, which is, it's called catastrophic thinking. Isn't it? I think there might be
so.
another word for that,
Yeah.
but where you think that it's just the end of the world over a small thing. And that's
Yeah.
trauma. It's
Yeah.
a
Trauma
thing.
response.
Yeah.
So, open up the conversation if you struggle with this and you want to know more. We will be doing in the future a mental health mini series. We're going to do short clips of different mental health focuses. We're going to go through the different types of abuse because when I was in my first marriage, I had no idea there were such things as financial abuse.
Right?
Or
Yes.
I kind of knew about emotional abuse, but it was like I didn't know what it was. And so when I started looking at those things, and I think my sister sent me something one day and she's like, D, all of these things you can check off. I'm scared for you. And I'm like, holy crap.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
scared for me too. Like my world was so skewed that I couldn't even see it
Yeah.
until somebody said, here's a checklist.
Yes. And I checked off every single one. Now, it was in counseling after I got out, but I was still considering going back. I was fairly certain I wasn't, but he got real close to getting me back the fifth time. And same thing, where the counselor said, look at this list. And I checked every single one off, and that's when it kind of went,
Yeah.
there is no way that you can go back. Like, this
Yeah.
is all abuse. I didn't even know that there were that many types of abuse. I thought there was just physical abuse.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So we're going to go through them. We're going to give you the checklists and the things to check off to see if they are in your relationships. And this isn't just about, intimate relationships. This is also parent-child relationships. This is, you as a parent to your child, your parents to you as a child, you to your parents as a child, there's so many things that I think some of us do that could be abusive that we just need to make sure that we're not perpetuating the cycle, right? Not only be aware of if it's happening to you, but be aware of it so we don't perpetuate the cycle. So, but if you're doing, some of these things, just don't beat yourself up about it. You're now, like I always go like, I'm now aware of it. I can
Yes.
change it now. I can't change the past. I can change the future. And being okay with making mistakes is a really big part of finding healing after the cult.
Yes.
And if you're not sure if you made a mistake that's not excusable or forgivable, message us. Let's talk it out. Get on the Facebook group. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about some of the mistakes that you've had, and we can be like, yeah, been there, done that.
So that at least you know that you're not alone.
Exactly. Because, that's part of why we want to have the group, is to find the community, to find the support, because everybody in your old world, and if they're still in it, is telling you everything you're doing is wrong. And sometimes you need somebody to say, no, this is okay. You may have made a mistake, but what can you do to make it better? What can you do to do it differently? And sometimes you just need a voice of reason.
Just need a different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we will say good night or good day, good evening, whatever it might be for you when you're watching this. So we hope that you will join us next week and join the rebellion. Bye.
Bye.